Nobody can deny that the early Corvette is an iconic car. It's beautiful. The lines, the stance, everything is really cool about it. But if you've ever drove one of these cars, it's a little tough. The suspension was designed in the 50s. It was built in the 60s. Now that we're in 2014, the ride is harsh. The handling is mediocre at best. Suspension choices for classic Corvettes were either an upgraded set of shocks or a complete chassis. What we've done is started with a clean sheet of paper using the stock chassis, bolt-on parts, and we've optimized the front suspension geometry, the rear suspension geometry, give you lots of adjustment. So you can bolt this on a car, you can cruise down the street, you can drive it hard around the racetrack, and best of all, you don't molest the originality of the car.
This is a project that could be done at home in your driveway with a good set of jack stands and a good jack. We're fortunate enough here to have a lift, so we're going to use it. First thing we want to do is remove the tie rods. Now, loosen the ball joint nuts, but don't take them all the way off. Shock the spindle to get the ball joint taper to come loose from the spindle. Now we'll support the lower control arm, remove the lower shock bolts and loosen the upper stud, and then remove the shock from the car. Using an appropriate spring compressor, compress the spring. With the spring out of the way, we can now remove the lower control arm and spindle assembly as one unit. So now all that's left is to get the upper control arm out of the way. Install the washers and lock nuts on the control arms, making sure that the dimples on the lock nuts face out. Now we're going to drop the lower control arm bolts through the frame and bolt the lower control arm into place. Referencing the Ridetech instructions, install the center caster slugs into the upper cross shaft. Install the upper control arms to the chassis, noting the upper cross shaft has an arrow that points to the front of the vehicle. On the upper control arm, we start with one shim in the front and two in the rear, and we'll do final alignment when the installation is finished. Install the coilover assembly into the chassis and tighten the adjuster nut until there's a slight drag on the Delrin bushing. We'll snug the spring, and then once the car is on the ground, we'll set the final ride height by adjusting the spanner nut. Install the lower shock bushings and bolt the shock to the lower control arm. We use the Ridetech tall spindle on this application. It gives it more camber gain, and it also allows you to use several brake options. It uses the same as the Camaro or the Chevelle style brake, so it's easy to get brake components for this in aftermarket. We now install the steering arm and steering stop. Note that the steering stop is marked D and P for drivers and passengers. We use one of the bolts from the kit to align the top hole where the brakes will be installed later.
So what we're looking at here is our true turn system. As a piece of metal, it's worth about 30 cents a pound. But what it represents is weeks and months of engineering and optimization for your steering linkage to eliminate bump steer on these cars. Back in the 50s, when you were using tall tires, bump steer was acceptable, almost designed into the car. In today's cars, you're using really short tires, so any variation in the toe change, which is the definition of bump steer, is going to make a dramatic difference in the way the car feels and how it handles and how it drives down the highway.
Assemble the tie rods according to the Ridetech assembly guide. Install the tie rod into the drag link adapter and the heim end onto the steering arm. Using the supplied lithium grease, lubricate the inside of the sway bar bushing. Install the bushings and mounting clamps to the bar. Loosely install the bar to the chassis. Measure the ends to center the bar. With the bar centered, now tighten your mounting bolts. Now install the clamp collars. Install the arms to the bar. The arms need to be clocked correctly. Tighten the arms and install the posi link.